All right, fight fans, welcome back for another deep dive into the world of combat sports. We're all about keeping you up to speed on what's happening in the ring and the octagon. So we've got a stack of fresh articles here covering some huge fights and the aftermaths that have been making headlines.
And it's interesting because these fights really seem to capture the state of combat sports. Right now, we're seeing the spectacle of celebrity boxing, the intensity of pro MMA, and, well, boxing and its drama.
Oh yeah, the drama never ends. So let's start with a fight that had everyone talking, even those who thought it shouldn't have happened. Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul.
This wasn't just a fight. It was an event. You had 70,000 fans at AT&T Stadium, celebrities everywhere, Netflix streaming it live. It shows you the power of nostalgia, big names, and, well, that curiosity to see what happens when those worlds collide.
Then collide, they did. Tyson came out swinging. You could see those glimpses of his old power, but the age difference, 31 years, started to show. As the fight went on, Paul played it safe. A lot of defense, picking his shots.
And what was interesting was Paul's comments after the fight. He was all about respect for Tyson, even saying he held back so he wouldn't embarrass him. It makes you wonder, how much was Tyson really giving it his all? Was this a real test of Paul's skill or more of a show?
That's the question, isn't it? Is celebrity doxing the real deal, or is it just entertainment dressed up as a sport? I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. And speaking of in between, can we talk about the Netflix streaming issues? Viewers were getting buffering delays. It felt like they missed a chance to really make a statement as a live sports platform.
Definitely, they had big hopes for this event. Those technical problems were a big blow, not just for this fight, but for their whole live sports streaming ambition. They're going up against ESPN plus DZN, even regular cable. They've all got that track record of solid live broadcasts. So Netflix has to prove it can handle those demands, especially with these huge events.
It was like they tripped walking into the ring. And speaking of stumbling, Tyson even mentioned maybe fighting Logan Paul next Jake's brother.
Now that would be something. But let's move on to a fight that was all about skill and high stakes. UFC 309.
This was a night of legends and goodbyes. We saw John Jones, one of the greatest to ever step in the octagon, defending his UFC heavyweight championship against Stipe Miocic, and it was a dominant performance.
Jones was in control the whole time. He was fighting smart, not just reacting, but anticipating Miocic's moves, finding those openings and setting the pace. The finishing blow was textbook, a spinning back kick to the body in the third round.
That kick was brutal. Miocic's manager said no broken bones, but it was clearly enough to end the fight, and it seems like it ended Miocic's career too. He announced his retirement right there in the octagon, the end of an era for the heavyweight division.
Liver shots. They're debilitating, even for the toughest fighters. They target those nerves that send shockwaves through your body. You're basically paralyzed for a moment, can't defend yourself.
It was a bittersweet moment seeing Miocic go out like that, a legend taking his final bow, but also a real display of Jones's power and precision. But UFC 309 wasn't just about goodbyes. It was also about fighters stepping up and making a name for themselves.
Absolutely. The co-main event, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler, that was a back-and-forth war that had everyone on the edge of their seats.
Oliveira got the win in the end. A unanimous decision puts him right back in line for another title shot. But that fifth round, man, that was something else. Chandler dropped Oliveira twice, but Oliveira just wouldn't quit. He weathered the storm, came back swinging. You don't see that kind of heart every day.
That was a huge win for Oliveira. He adapted his style throughout the fight, showed real resilience and fight hue. Chandler's known for his power, but Oliveira neutralized that threat and took advantage of his openings.
It was a reminder that Oliveira is still a major force in the lightweight division. He's not backing down from anyone. And speaking of challenges, Chandler ended the night calling out Conor McGregor.
Now that's a fight everyone wants to see. McGregor's always a bit of a mystery, though he's been quiet lately. So who knows if he's really motivated to get back in the octagon, and what would it take to make that fight happen? A lot of questions, but I have a feeling we'll get some answers soon.
Well, while we wait for McGregor to decide, let's talk about another kind of drama, the kind that follows boxing, like a shadow controversy.
You're talking about the undercard fight, the rematch between Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor. Their first fight back in 2022 was a war. Taylor won by a split decision, so everyone was hyped for this rematch.
And it did not disappoint. Both fighters were at their best, incredible skill and determination. Serrano was relentless, putting pressure on Taylor. The whole time Taylor countered with her speed and footwork. It was a technical clinic.
But there were these two moments that really shifted the whole fight. Two headbutts from Taylor that opened cuts on Taylor. Serrano headbutts are illegal in boxing. They usually mean points deducted, which can completely change the result of a fight.
So you can imagine the shock when Taylor won by unanimous decision. Fans, commentators were outraged. They felt that Serrano's pressure and those headbutts should have meant a win for her. Serrano was furious. She felt robbed of a victory.
Controversial decisions like this, whether those headbutts were intentional or not, really raise questions about judging in boxing. Why did the judges score it for Taylor? Were they ignoring those headbutts? Did they get swayed by Taylor's late surge?
It's a question that's been haunting boxing for years. How do you make sure things are fair? How do you guarantee judges are applying the rules consistently? It's tough. There are no easy answers, but these conversations have to happen. The sport needs to be accountable. We need to push for changes that will actually make it better.
It comes down to respecting the fighters a level playing field. And at the end of the day, giving the fans something they can trust. Without that trust, the whole thing falls apart.
It does, yeah.
And, it makes you think about Netflix and their, big entrance into live sports.
Yeah, their debut wasn't exactly a knockout, was it? Those technical issues were a pretty big stumble. You have to wonder how that's going to affect their plans going forward.
Definitely a setback, for sure. Not just for this event, but for their whole live sports streaming ambitions. They're up against some big players, platforms that have been doing this for years, and they've got the infrastructure to prove it.
It raises the question, can they actually recover from this and establish themselves as a platform people can rely on for live sports? Because right now, they're competing with the big leagues.
Right. Netflix has the audience and the money, but they have to show they can handle the technical stuff, especially for these high-profile events. And it's not just about avoiding glitches. It's about that whole viewing experience, making it something that stands out from the competition.
I'm thinking about interactive features. Some platforms offer, real-time stats, different camera angles, even being able to chat with other viewers. Netflix needs to be thinking about that kind of innovation if they want to be a contender.
It's a different game than on-demand streaming, for sure. The landscape is changing, and the ones who can adapt and, innovate, they're the ones who will come out on top.
This whole Paul Tyson fight, it might not have been a classic boxing match, but it could be a turning point in how we watch live sports. It reminds us that things are changing fast and we're all part of it.
Speaking of fast-paced,
Yeah.
let's get back to the octagon and those incredible fights at UFC 309. While everyone was focused on Paul Tyson, there were some truly amazing displays of athleticism and skill happening in the UFC.
John Jones, right? That guy just keeps rewriting the record books. He's cementing his place as one of the greatest MMA fighters ever. His win over Stipe Miocic, it was like a masterclass in controlled aggression and, just tactical dominance.
That spinning back kick that finished the fight was beautiful. Jones just has this ability to combine technique, power, and timing that sets him apart. And remember, this was his first fight at heavyweight after dominating at light heavyweight. He basically conquered one division and said, why not test myself against the biggest guys in the sport?
And he didn't just test himself. He dominated Miocic, a two-time heavyweight champ. He's no joke, but he was outclassed by Jones's skills. It's crazy to think that Jones is still getting better even after all these years at the top.
He's always studying the game, always refining his technique, adding new moves, and staying ahead of the curve. It shows his work ethic and that desire to be the best.
And then you have Charles Oliveira, who showed so much heart and resilience in his win over Michael Chandler.
That fifth round was unbelievable. Both fighters pushing themselves to the limit. Chandler almost finished Oliveira a couple of times, but Oliveira just wouldn't give up. He came back from the edge of defeat to win. Talk about a gutsy performance.
That win was huge. It shows that Oliveira is still a top contender, and he wants that lightweight title back, the one he lost last year.
That lightweight division is stacked right now. It's like a who's who of contenders all fighting for that belt.
It's going to be wild watching it all play out. Will Oliveira get his revenge and take back the title? Or will someone new step up and take it all?
That's what's so great about this sport. You just never know what's going to happen. The uncertainty, the drama, the highs and lows. It's all part of what makes it so exciting.
And UFC 309 had all of that. It was a night of incredible fights, emotional moments, and a reminder that even in a sport as tough as MMA, there's always room for skill, strategy, and a whole lot of heart. Those who can combine those things are the ones who rise to the top.
Just like Jones and Oliveira, they showed us why they're considered the best fighters in the world.
And as we move forward, it's going to be interesting to see how these two champions continue to shape the sport, because their stories aren't finished yet.
They both have things they still want to achieve. And that hunger, that drive to compete and win, that's what fuels combat sports. It's what keeps the fans on the edge of their seats wondering what's going to happen next.
And in a world that often feels so predictable and routine, that element of surprise, that potential for something unexpected, it's something special. It's what keeps us coming back even when we know there could be disappointment.
Because in the end, it's not just about winning or losing. It's about the journey, the struggle, The moments of victory and defeat that define these athletes and capture our imagination.
It's about pushing yourself to your limits, testing your boundaries, and discovering what you're truly capable of. That's why we love combat sports. It's raw, it's unpredictable, and it's human. It's that passion that shines through even when a fighter loses. And it makes me think about Amanda Serrano and how much heart she showed against Katie Taylor.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Even with that controversial decision, Serrano proves she's one of the toughest, most skilled boxers in the world. I mean, she never stopped coming forward. She kept the pressure on this, landed some huge shots.
And she did all that with those cuts from the headbutts. It must have been so distracting and painful. Her resilience was incredible. It's just a shame that those headbutts, intentional or not, had such a big impact on the fight.
Yeah, it really shows you that even in a sport with as many rules as boxing, things can go wrong. And those things can really change the result. Makes you think about the rules themselves, the officials, the whole idea of fairness in the sport.
These aren't new problems for boxing, though, are they? They've been dealing with this stuff for years. It's not an easy fix. But these conversations are important. The sport needs to be held accountable, and we have to push for changes that will actually make a difference.
It's about respect for the fighters.
Mm.
The level playing field and giving fans something they can have faith in. Without that trust, the whole thing falls apart.
And speaking of trust and, delivering a product, I want to go back to Netflix for a second. Their first attempt at live sports was, well, a learning experience.
Yeah, those technical issues were a big misstep for sure. But, Netflix, they've got a history of adapting and learning from their mistakes. They've changed the entertainment industry before. I wouldn't count them out of live sports just yet.
They've got a huge audience, tons of money, and they're not afraid to take risks. I mean, look at this whole Call Tyson thing.
Exactly. So the question is, how do they change things up? Do they go after exclusive rights to those big sporting events? Or do they stick with these hybrid events that mix sport and entertainment?
It'll be interesting to see what happens. But one thing's certain, Netflix isn't going anywhere, and their move into live sports is going to change things, whether we like it or not. More competition is always good, though, right? It makes everyone step up their game, and ultimately the fans benefit.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into combat sports, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've talked about the spectacle, the controversy, the amazing skill and athleticism. Where does it all go from here? Will these events like Paul Tyson keep making headlines and bringing in new fans?
Or will the focus shift back to the pure skill and competition at the highest level? Can those two worlds exist together? Are we heading towards a future where sport and entertainment are basically the same thing?
Those are the questions that are shaping the future of combat sports, and they're questions that all of us as fans have to consider as we navigate this changing world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exciting look at the world of combat sport.